Swami Kriyananda's part to play in Yogananda's mission was to make practical and expressible and understandable in this world all the very high ideas he came to bring. He was a representative of the most ancient Indian teachings, which is not really Hinduism. It's what they call Sanatan Dharma. Dharma is a word that many of you know. Right action, that action which expands consciousness is really how we can determine what right action is. Sanatan Dharma also has several other explanations. Sanskrit language, which I know very little, I know just these few words here and there, it's also called Sanatan Dharma is the eternal religion, but that is not as accurate to me is my favorite definition, which is that which is, which is just the simple fact that that's the way things are. And most of our lives, in fact, all of our lives, if you really think back on your life experience and the experience of everyone you know, every single choice that we make is because we think it's going to increase our happiness and decrease our suffering. Many of those decisions in retrospect are exceedingly stupid. But, and this is one of my favorite mantras, it seemed like a good idea at the time. Because if it didn't seem like a good idea, we wouldn't have done it. And there's a whole lot of other truths. And by truth, I'm not talking about some institutional truth or anything like that. I'm talking about what every sentient being and every conscious human being figures out, because we have this constant quest to escape suffering and to find happiness. And somehow we know inside ourselves that we were born for joy. Because if we didn't know that we were born for joy, we would be content to suffer. Because if we actually knew inside ourselves that this is my condition, it's never going to change, we wouldn't waste our energy trying to shift it. But all of life, and even from the level of the worm, a worm can be trained to avoid the electric shock because they suffer when they get the electric shock, so they're going to seek another alternative to that. In a very real way, the entire experience of human life, now this is all part of Sanatan Dharma. One of the reasons I always introduce Swami Kriyananda, Paramhansa Yogananda before I speak is because I am not the origin point of anything that I'm saying. I have been extremely well trained. I've had the opportunity, I had a very close association with Swami Kriyananda for 45 years. For the first 16, I lived next door to him, worked for him as a secretary, was in contact with him, then I was shipped out, so to speak. One of the things that Kriyananda, as Yogananda's representative, wanted to do, Yogananda said that the lifestyle of the future, alas, he didn't say how far in the future, would be in small intentional communities of people gathered because of their frequency, because of their shared frequency. Back in 1969, one of the glorious things that Kriyananda said was he was starting such a community up in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada in Northern California, and anybody was welcome to join. And it was a scene. It was the 60s. Everybody was going back to the land. The joke was if you could chant Om and said you were off drugs, you could come and live in the community. And it was about like that, even though that wasn't the final intention. We were absolutely dirt poor. I mean, I worked for Swami Kriyananda, and he opened his wallet every month and gave me $50, which was a lot more money then than it is now. And basically I had to buy food, and in the wintertime I had to have a propane tank so I wouldn't be cold. I lived in a little trailer that was a little wider than this and twice as long as this and about that high. There's a set of exercises we do where you go like that, but I had to go like that. But in any case, I was there for 16 years helping to build it up from the ground. Most fun I've ever had. I'd repeat those first 10 years in a heartbeat. We knew we were doing something that really mattered. And the point was to do what society is trying to do right now. I was traveling in the UK last year sometime, and I've been to England before, but for some reason I was going through the countryside. My hosts were taking me through the countryside. Every little village virtually had some gorgeous big church, right? And now those churches are still standing. The society is built up around them. But when you think back to when they were built, you know, there were small houses, didn't mean very much, and everybody devoted themselves to building this huge building. And this huge building was the center of everybody's life. That was where life centered. You got married there, you probably met your spouse there, death was there, everything. Now those buildings are still there, but they're no longer the center of anything. They're being turned into museums, into concert halls, into meeting houses, just anything. But there's nothing has replaced it, not yet. Because we're done with being told who we're supposed to be. This is where we're entering into a new age of where form is giving way to energy. This is the shift between matter and energy. This is part of Sanatana Dharma. This is part of what Yogananda taught. You can just see it. Starting in 1900 officially, you can see the whole world has changed. The mere fact that we're all sitting here, that we're all talking to each other, that I'm filming this because my friend who does the social media will be really mad at me if we don't film it, you know? But all of that, 100 years ago, nobody would have even dreamed of it, speak of doing it. Everything is changing, and it's changing to empower us as individuals to seek our understanding as individuals. You know, the church or the temple or the synagogue or the mosque always would tell you what you were supposed to be. The country would tell you, the culture would tell you, the language would tell you. Look at it. Look at us in this room. We're just a complete hodgepodge of everythingness. But the unifying force is internal. And that's what we're working with. This is the age of energy, where we realize that with our willpower, we can affect our own destiny. And more than that, we want to know it for ourselves. And I'm sure many of your biographies are very similar to mine, which is just an unwillingness to just take, even if we loved our parents and respected them, or the culture around us, whatever it was, to take somebody else's word for it, because we need to know for ourselves. And this is the drama of human life, is to ask this question. Yogananda called it, he wrote a little book when he came to America from India in 1920. It's called The Science of Religion. And science isn't just the laboratory, it's proved by experiment. That's what the real concept of science is. So the science of religion is not the dogma that somebody else tells you. It's proved by experience. And that's why the guiding star for now is joy. Because we're waking up to that simple question. I don't want to suffer and I want to find joy. But however, we don't really learn from being told. We learn from our own experience. I remember at one point, I had a friend, I put my small suitcase on the hood of the car. And my friend said, don't do that, it'll scratch the hood of the car. And I said, oh really, like that? And I didn't believe him, right. So later on, I put my suitcase on there, and then that time I dragged it off instead of lifting it off, and well, what do you know? It scratched the hood of the car. I mean, that's a pretty dumb thing, but it was a perfect example of just people tell you, they know, but until you actually scratch the hood of your car with your stupid suitcase, then but then after that you know. Don't you like that? Now, that's a silly example, but I'm sure all of you in your biographies like mine have other stories where you know that until you knew it, you didn't know it. And once you know it, you can't unknow it. Okay, so there's many, all of progress in life, what to speak of all of spiritual life, is an ever increasing awareness. Think about that. even from childhood. I've never raised children myself in this incarnation. But you know, a baby, there'll be a certain point where a baby will discover his hands because there's this object flips in front of him and scares him. And woo, what is that? Because he isn't aware that this is his or hers and isn't aware that he can control it. The baby tries to learn to eat. You give him the spoon and he tries to feed it to his forehead or to his ear or to the dog, you know, and then gradually they become aware of all of these things. And so all of progress in your life, I'm sure, is in mine. I saw Swami Kriyananda. I became aware. I knew it theoretically, because I'd read a lot of books at that point. I knew it theoretically that you could radically change your consciousness, but I'd never experienced it. And so in theory, I was trying to do that, but when I perceived it, that experience completely changed everything. And my whole life has been guided by the faith in the fact that if I follow in those footsteps, I'll become more and more like that person. Big gap still, but moving in the right direction. Okay, so but every time you learn something that you weren't aware of, it should also raise the question, how much else am I not aware of? You know, what are the limits of expanding my consciousness? And this is why the great masters and the saints and the geniuses of this world come into this world, and they show us on countless levels something completely different. They show us a revelation of that which is. You know, even Albert Einstein, who's well known in the scientific field, of course, you know, he perceived realities, and then he had to reason it out afterwards. He didn't do the math first. The first thing he saw was a perception of it. And all of us are walking around with a revelation at all times, and just start with the primary revelation. I was born for bliss. And all of our lifetimes, and this is the principle of reincarnation, nothing of this that I'm saying, Sanatana Dharma doesn't work if you try to make it from when you first appeared in this body and then when you leave this body. We have the marvelous benefit nowadays, which is part of the rising age of energy, that we have these magnificent near-death experiences, which everybody is talking to us about now. And they're just one of the funnest ones. People send these to me all the time because they know I'm interested. This one woman was talking about what had happened to her, and she said, I felt this extraordinary love, and she used the word God, but she said what is really true, that vocabulary is very difficult when you start talking about revelation, because words are symbols, and if you haven't had the revelation, you don't necessarily catch what the symbol means. But she had to use the word God because there was no other word. She said, I felt this unconditional love from God, unconditional love, and I knew it was coming from this light and this God that was there. She said, and even more remarkably, God liked me, is what she said. And you could see that she was kind of a rough-edged character. And she said very authentically into the camera, a lot of people don't like me, but God liked me. Somehow that had a very deep effect on my heart, because look how different we all are in this room. I've been here for a couple of days already and shaking the hands of people, and I'm charmed to find out that nobody knew why we were here either. When I was invited, it came through, you know, other sources, and I was invited. I basically said, "Really? Why are you inviting me? You know, what do you think?" But the longer I've been here, now that we are here, I can really see it. Because there's also this incredible drama going on the planet right now. And the Sanatana Dharma explanation, Yogananda's explanation, is very simply that we're coming into an age of energy. This is what they've asked me to talk about at the Festival of Consciousness, so I can't give the whole talk now. But we are coming into an age of energy, moving out of an age of matter. It's a very turbulent transition. And it's a very polarized period of time. In a descending age, at this same tradition, when energy was transition, when energy was moving into matter, that's the Battle of Kurukshetra, the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita. It's the same point on the circular rising and falling of civilization. We're at the same point. They were going down, we're coming up. I don't know which is better. When you're in a dark age, society is just hopeless. And so if you're interested in spiritual life, and Jesus was born at a very dark period, because the drama is not actually what's going on the planet. The planet is the backdrop. The drama is the individual evolution of consciousness. The individual learning from experience what causes suffering and what brings happiness. So if you're born into a descending age, which you are if it's appropriate, you get to just leave society behind, which I think is a very relaxing concept myself. You just get to go in the monastery, you go to the Himalayas, you go off to the desert, and that's what all the disciples of Christ did. They just went away because there was just nothing they could do about society. It was going down and getting worse. But if you're born at this point like we are, we have a job to do. And we have a really serious job to do. We are the future. And there are many people on this planet now who think that the future should look like the past. If you really think about it, that's what's going on. They're trying to keep people separate. They're trying to keep people angry. They're trying to keep for themselves. They're trying to think, the more I get from me, it doesn't matter if I'm taking it from you as long as I have it. And because we're coming out of a lower age, there's a lot of external power in a lot of those souls who, bear in mind, this is annoying, but it's true, we're all equally loved by God. And God even likes us. One of the concepts that Yogananda brought to the world, and being in a female body, when I say this, I have to explain it a little because I don't want you to misunderstand, was the concept of God as Divine Mother. And it's not a gender-related idea. So I'm not standing up to say women should be as divine as men. Of course we should be. We're just two sides of one coin. It doesn't make any difference. But what we need is an understanding of divinity that comforts us. And Jesus himself said, after I am gone, I will send the Comforter. Can you think of a more accurate word in English to define the ideal mother as the Comforter? Isn't that so? And so what Yogananda wanted to present was the understanding that we are loved and liked by the divine. And yes, if we get philosophical about it, it's only a mind idea because we need to make a transition between the consciousness that we have and the realization of who we really are. So everything is a symbol, but it's a true symbol. There's two ways of using ideas to help us. One is to restrict us, and other is to expand our understanding so that we can keep increasing our awareness. So this idea of Divine Mother, who loves all her children equally, and sometimes the mother likes her naughty children, seems to favor them even more, because they're suffering so much and they need so much help. And a time of transition like this is a very good time for what I call Divine Mother's rowdy children to come in and test their theories of what will make them happy. And there's a lot of them around testing their theories. How selfish can I be? How self-indulgent can I be? How indifferent can I be? How many nuclear weapons can I have? How many military can I have? And that's the apparent energy of this time. But everything that manifests in this world, it starts with an idea. Think about it. Seeing this facility, and I'm sure it didn't look like this when they saw it at the beginning, but they saw it and they had an idea. And if they had never had the idea of what was possible, this would never have manifested. But we have many ideas, at least I do. My little brain hardly ever shuts off. We have lots and lots of ideas, but you have to put energy into that idea. And then when you put energy into an idea, if you put enough energy into that idea, eventually it manifests. That energy is money, that energy is imagination, that energy is faith, that energy is talent. All of these things in this facility is a perfect example of that. A beautiful idea that came in that way, which means an unmistakable call from God. But then you have to put the energy behind it. Merely having the idea, nothing will come of it. But the consistent application of willpower, the patient, consistent application of willpower causes it to manifest. So everything that's already manifested in a very real sense is already behind us. And there are new ideas that are coming in that people are putting energy into that are beginning to manifest. In the last few years, I've traveled a great deal around the world, from Estonia to Japan to South Africa to lots of places. I was very pessimistic in a certain sense about the state of the planet until I started traveling. And then everywhere we went, it's like mushrooms, just growing up in the forest. People see things differently. The first thing I noticed, well, there's a few things I noticed. Nobody smokes anymore. Really. The first time I went to India, the left side of the plane was non-smoking and the right side of the plane was smoking. Can you believe it? There's a lot of things about that culture, but a few things they had to work out, okay? But nobody, the whole airport, and I think it was New York where we were, no smoking in this airport. Everybody used to smoke, nobody even thought about it. The other thing that I love is vegan restaurants. Yeah, and every place, Lithuania, Latvia. Oh, we'll take you out. There's a great vegan restaurant, or there's 2 or 3 vegan restaurants. You stand on the street of London, if you toss a brick, you'll hit 3 or 4 of them. But think how many things have to happen in terms of consciousness for a person to even think about being vegan, to have the idea to open a restaurant, the energy, and then enough customers to keep it open. I mean, these are things that we take it so for granted, we're not even noticing. But that's the future. This is the future. We are the future. We chose to incarnate at this time, but there's a whole lot of counterforce. And now here comes the part, and this is why we're here. And we're going to the Festival of Consciousness. Can you imagine a festival based on consciousness? Again, think just 25 or 50 years ago when yoga was a kind of yogurt, right? I've been on what I lovingly call the lunatic fringe for a very, very long time. And I've watched what used to be lunatic fringe become mainstream. And I say to my friends, come on guys, we have to move over. Because if they're catching up to us that fast, this is how change always takes place. A few people create energy, and that energy creates magnetism. And then people are drawn into that, and then it flows right through it. And then those of us with vision have to keep moving over. And it's also a divine law because this is a dual universe. The mistake we make is to think that this is anything but a school, and that somehow we're going to finish and get this thing set up. There's only going to be sunrises, there's not going to be sunset. There's only going to be youth, there's not going to be age. This is a dual reality here, and we find the unity inside. And we resolve the duality inside ourselves when we raise our consciousness. That's the whole art of meditation. That's what we're doing exactly. It's not that we leave this behind. And in this particular age, as I was saying at the beginning, this is a time, and this was Yogananda's whole message. He was a creative artist and he taught how to find your soulmate, how to make a lot of money, how to reconcile your health. And Kriyananda just took it. He wrote more than 100 books about money, about art, about architecture, about music, just everything. If the goal is to increase our awareness and to raise our consciousness, then how should I live? Yogananda had that as a phrase, how to live. How do I educate children? Ananda has started a whole educational movement, Education for Life, it's called. Education for actual living and education that lasts your whole life. But it is the vibration of consciousness and the nature of our energy, of our frequency. It's a perfect way to put it. It's our frequency that actually changes things. But then, of course, we have to figure out how to express it. So it's a twofold project that we're working on, and coming together as a way of helping it. Because my life just, I was picked up by God and dropped in one place and then just have stayed there in a certain sense. So I'm so fascinated just to hear how everybody else is being inspired and what we're being moved to do. And what is happening for us right now is we need to do original work. And I'm using that word instead of creative in a very particular sense. Original work is that which comes from our own point of origin. But we can't act from our own point of origin unless we're in tune with it, can we? So this is where all of the spiritual practices, this is the entire point of all inner practice, is just to pull ourselves back from just behaving like everyone else. When I was 15 years old, when I was 15, I realized that high-heeled shoes were very difficult to comprehend the logic of them. So I took them off and I never put them on again. Then I began to understand that fashion itself was just a question of whether you were embarrassed. And I wasn't embarrassed, and therefore I didn't have to do any of that. I mean, how much of what we think of is necessary and real is somebody else's idea? No, it's not original just to do it to be different. And that's what we sometimes misunderstand, that original means, well, you do it that way, I do it this way. Original means to be attuned in what you might call a vertical way. We have the superconscious, we have the conscious where we normally live, we have the subconscious dimension. I say subconscious not quite the way psychologists use it. Subconscious is all that energy that's stored in your chakras, which is all the experiences of all your past incarnations, which are no longer in there as things, but everything represents a vibration of consciousness, from complete materialistic non-understanding of any more subtle dimension to the state of a Christ, of an avatar, of a God-realized soul. So every action that we take reflects whatever vibration of reality we are living on. And of course, we're not just one, we think of ourselves as like one long-distance runner. We're much more like a whole soccer team. And every so often the star gets the ball and does really well, and every so often the idiot gets the ball and hides it under the bench. It's a complicated issue. But what is our subconscious is everything that we already know and have learned up to this point. And all of the influences that cause us to be ourselves and to react. And we just continue that way because it's the path of least resistance. The energy in the chakras pulls our consciousness to it. It's familiar, and we just keep repeating it. In the chakras, it's a vritti is the word. It's a vortex, like this. The superconscious is that part of ourselves which literally opens out to infinity. And that's where we look when we're trying to understand not where we've been, but where we're going. But it takes more energy, takes more courage, takes more determination, partly because of the karma that's here that pulls us in this direction, and then we're being drawn in the other. The conscious mind is the battlefield between those two forces. Isn't that so? That's the battle of Kurukshetra in the Mahabharata that the Bhagavad Gita talks about. The forces of enlightenment, the forces that want to keep us deluded. And we're all here because we're the Pandavas from the Mahabharata. If you know that story, we are the future. We have caught the wave that says we must do it differently. First of all, because we see that the world is heading for calamity. And unfortunately, Yogananda predicted quite strongly that this will be a very turbulent transition. And it's not going to be a smooth ride because there's just too much committed energy. However, he also said, and this is very important, those who, well, he used the phrase, those who love God. But what he meant by that was not anything that has to do with religion. It has to do with revelation. Those who love the light, those who feel that we were made for joy, those of us who know that awakening is the whole purpose of our lives. If we are generating our own reality from an inner connection, we will be protected. At what level, Kriyananda often says, because everyone will die. But we will be protected because we will be generating our own magnetism and we'll be carrying the light into the future. Whatever kind of work you're doing, but the power of the work that we're doing depends on the consciousness that we bring to it. Because people feel your vibration first. You know, the first thing people feel is who you are. In our school, the motto is very simple. What you know is important, but who you are is what really matters. That's what we're all beginning to understand. The work that we're doing is important, but who we are as we do it is what will really determine the success. Not merely the quantity of energy, but the quality of energy. Because that's where the battle is happening now. It's happening on a vibrational level, on the level of frequency. And so what we have to look to is we have to ask, what is my original contribution? Meaning, when I go to my point of origin, which is within my heart, within my spirit, I'll lead a meditation in a few moments, the energy of the spiritual eye, where we're going, when we get in tune with that, then the ideas automatically come to us. In Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda said, thoughts are not individual, they are universal. We merely receive the vibrations that we're in tune with. And you know, people have ideas about how a guru operates as if somehow, I used to teach beginning meditation classes many years ago, and many things would happen. People would come into class and there would be the pictures of the guru, and I'm a devotee, I speak about Divine Mother very effortlessly. I've worked my way up to that. I didn't start there, but I had enough experience. And they would say, well, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. I say, tell me about the God you don't believe in. And they would explain to me the God they don't believe in, and we would agree that neither of us agree. It's a terrible concept. Only a moron would believe in that. Right. So vocabulary is a problem, especially in English, which is unfortunately my only language, but God doesn't actually mean anything until you get a dogma to go with it. In Sanskrit, there's hundreds of words that all are actually a synonym for God, but they're experiential. Prem, love. Shanti, peace. Ananda, joy. And so that's what it really is. We were made for bliss. And it has the power of the infinite because it is exactly who we are. But we have to act with that consciousness. And in the face of, often, extremely discouraging, even terrifying possibilities. So what do we bring to it? Do we bring anger? Do we bring, I'm going to make you be like me? And that doesn't mean, now you have to understand, Anandamayi Ma, who was a great saint in India, she died in 1982, she had an expression, you know, God, everything comes from God, so what comes of itself, let it come. One of her disciples said, even if somebody tries to get you to do a bad thing, you just let them, and Anandamayi Ma said, let them try. Because that power of alignment, to be spiritual is not always to be nice. And that's a grave mistake that people make. To be spiritual is to stand at your point of origin, to understand that we are a manifestation of far greater power than is obvious, and to align yourself with that and never give up. Just never give up. But above all, you must never give up your right consciousness. Choose what comes to you, what God wants you to do, but then you have to do it as an instrument of the light. Because if we lose that, we lose everything. Because that's really what the battle is. The details, and the details are immense, but the power, especially now, because we're moving into a different reality, especially now. It's all about aligning, acting from your point of origin, and being an instrument of a higher power. The thoughts are universal. We need to attune ourselves with a much higher vibration. Yogananda writes, Kriyananda writes, I believe this with my whole heart. I have to say, I mean, you can tell I'm a person of my own willpower. When Swami Kriyananda, he said when he went to live with Yogananda, which he did 5 days after he'd read Autobiography of a Yogi, he said it was such a shift. Every so often he had to sit down. He actually felt dizzy. He had the intuitive understanding that Yogananda was a man of absolute wisdom. He said, so I followed him unhesitatingly. He said, but not unquestioningly. And basically when I met Kriyananda, that was me. I knew that his awareness was so much bigger than mine that I wanted to follow that. This is what I was saying. People don't understand what a guru really is. A guru, people would say to me when I would teach these beginning mass classes, I don't want anybody taking over my life. I would say, no such luck, honey. It would be great if somebody would take over your life, but nobody will take over your life. Nobody can. But what a person of wisdom, a true teacher, he vibrates. And that vibration, if you're interested in it, is like singing in the choir. If you hear the note and you know that that's the note you want to sing, it helps to hear it. And if you're not interested, you don't hear it. Just as simple as that. But if you are interested and it's constantly vibrating for you, thoughts are universal. And Yogananda writes, they're being projected by Babaji and the other great masters from the Himalayas much more than we realize. Everything in this world is a reflection of a higher world. Look at this world. You have those who really understand and others follow. And if they're true leaders and helpful, they empower you. Isn't that what happens? You get stronger because you get in tune with what they're in tune with. And there is a tremendous amount of light being projected to this world by saints and masters who are just trying to help us. And so it's a question of asking the right questions in the right way with a willingness to know. Just with the willingness to know. That's all that counts. You don't have to be good at it. We're not only loved, we're actually liked. I have this strange picture in my mind of all the masters sitting together having coffee somewhere in the astral world and talking about the remarkable things their disciples have done. Can you imagine? Let me tell you the most crazy story of what one of mine did, you know? We just make lots of mistakes. But if we're sincere, that's all that matters. If it's just really, genuinely, when everything else is done, I want to be an instrument of the light. I want to help others to learn their lessons, to find joy. It gets really simple. Then every project that you take on, every work that you do, is how much can I love? How much can I serve? And however you think of the higher power, whether it's yourself or Divine Mother, guide me. Help me to do the right thing. Show me what's right so that I can move in that way. Once you catch that, life gets so interesting. And one last thing, and it's very important. The other reason that we're here to build the future, and I'll speak for myself, but I know it's true for all of us. What are the things that cause us suffering and take away happiness? One of them is fear, isn't it? Fear of other people suffering, fear of violence, fear of all these sorts of things. So I know that I'm here in this incarnation, not only to help set a mood, but also because I'm a little afraid, or a lot afraid. And perfect love casts out all fear, St. John in the Bible. So I get the chance to confront my fears. If the world were perfect, I wouldn't have that chance, would I? So we all have karma on that side of it too. That's why the opportunity to hold on to the light is such an important part of our own personal destiny. In 1986, I traveled to India for the first time, In 1986, India was not yet open to foreign corporations, so it was a very different country at that point. I'd never been out of the Western world. I looked out the window and I saw people living on the sidewalk, all the kinds of things that you would see there. I was in the Grand Hotel in Calcutta, and for the 5 days I was there was a whole family living on the sidewalk, and I would just watch their life like there. But that first night driving on the bus at 3 in the morning, which is what happens when you fly from here to there, well, here, USA to here, there. And I thought to myself, we have all the money in the world and all the technology in the world. We can make this planet a heaven on earth. Nothing is holding us back, except we don't want to. Just as simple as that. And I was already 15 years in the ashram life, so I wasn't going to take another profession at that point. But I thought, we have to change the human heart. And I've considered myself as a completely inactive political person as one of the most political people I know, because I am determined to awaken people to a higher possibility to change the human heart, and that is the revolution, which is why, whatever form your origin point dictates for you to do, you have to do it with that consciousness. Because if we don't change the human heart, nothing will ever change. That's the meta solution, if I'm using that word correctly.